Welcome to Creative Bath, the podcast for creatives. I'm Jamie, a designer, and today I have an interview with Matt Jagiello, whichever name I guess you want to call him. He's a good friend of mine who I met during my time teaching abroad in France. And he now lives in Barcelona after living in New Zealand for a couple of years. And he's out there in the comedy scene. He's also a web designer and a tour guide, I think, for kayaking, which honestly sounds really fun. And I was a little jealous when he told me about that gig. But I wanted to just kind of set up an intro before getting into the interview. So during this talk, you'll hear a lot of laughing. Once again, he's a comedian, so it kind of comes hand in hand and we giggle a lot. It was just nice to be able to connect with him again. And I was able to take this trip because I was studying in Switzerland and I actually had a good amount of free time, and I made it a plan to go and visit him in Barcelona, meet up with a couple of other friends that we met in camp, and just kind of catch up. And I was really excited to go see him perform comedy. First of all, I love comedy. It's something that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole personally. I can't. Being on stage is kind of my nightmare. So I have a ton of respect for people who do that craft. And I also was excited to cheer on my friend. So without further ado, here's Matty J. Okay, so we met when we worked in France, working at a summer camp.
Yeah.
Which is not as fancy or not, it's never as like how it seems to people. Have you found that same experience or not at all?
What do you mean? Can you repeat the question?
Okay, when you tell people how we met, or
right.
like I think when you say I worked in France, it's like
I worked at a camp in France. People are like, ooh, glamorous, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, no, it really isn't.
Yeah, it was.
Like, the food was not of French quality that you hear about in the papers.
No, and it was pretty low budget, but kind of in a fun way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Definitely in a fun way.
But that's how we met, and I remember seeing you do little like comedy bits, or just like we had to do performances for the kids and everything. And so I feel like I saw you starting comedy through social media because we weren't living in the same place. So I was like, oh, that sounds fun. And I think we had a couple of calls and you showed me some of your material.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's a bunch of birds.
Yeah.
We were sitting in a park in Barcelona, so.
Yeah, and there's for those of you without eyes, there's a pretty white bird.
Is it a stork?
It could be, but where's its baby?
But okay, so let's see. So you started comedy, and I'm curious about just tell me about how it happened.
How it happened.
Yeah.
So I'd been thinking about doing stand-up for like several years, actually. I remember specifically being in New Zealand, living in Queenstown, and they had a weekly comedy show at one of the bars, and I went to it a few times, and I remember thinking like, oh my God, I could do that. Like, I'm funnier than these people. But I was just always scared to put the pen to the paper and actually write something, because I'm like, maybe I'm funny in person, but what if I write it and it's not funny? And I think that's where a lot of people like tend to talk themselves out of it, because I talked myself out of it by saying that for like 3 years before I actually...
3 years?
Yeah, at least. And then when I moved to Barcelona, I went to a comedy show with a friend, and it had been a while since my last one I saw. And I was like, okay, I want to do this. And I actually walked up to the showrunners after, and I was like, hey, I want to give it a go. Do you have a show that I could potentially do it? And they were like, no. They were like, no, we don't have any more shows for the season. And I was like, okay. And then, but then I saw on Instagram that the same troupe, maybe it wasn't made at the time, it wasn't scheduled at the time, like they had their showcase for the year or whatever. And then I saw like they had an LGBT show, and so I wrote them and I was like, hi, I'm gay, and would you like like, I'd like to try my first ever comedy set. I've been thinking about it for years, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, you know what, sure, you could have 4 minutes. And so having that deadline of like knowing when the show is going to be and how much time I have to write it, because I didn't have anything written before I like signed up for it. But having the deadline is what
like pushed you.
Yeah, because like otherwise I would have just been like, oh, maybe I'll get to it someday. But then like having the deadline, rehearsing and everything, and it went very, very well. And yeah, and now there's like a monthly LGBT show. So that was the first one that they ever did in Barcelona, and I got on it.
The first LGBT one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and now there's like a big queer comedy scene here, and yeah, so that's how I got into it, really.
I feel like I've been surprised by how big the English-speaking comedy scene is here, and like we went to a show last night, and the diversity in the room really blew my mind, and just like I don't know, it's an interesting thing because I feel like comedy can not depend on, but you're doing comedy and the hopes is that there's some sort of loud noise. The hopes is that the people in the room connect to it and find it funny. I think it's interesting to connect to so many different cultures, like with comedy. And maybe being queer is like, I feel like that is like maybe a global experience where people connect to that. But is that ever challenging for you?
I mean, anywhere you go, it's going to be a different audience. Like the LGBT shows are my favorite stage to perform on because the audience is always so receptive to what I say. Like most of my comedy stuff is about like my experience as a queer person and like growing up. I have a set about like growing up and my mom's side of the family is like Catholic, and other stuff about first experiences with stuff.
Okay.
And so like the queer audience really responds to it well because they have similar experiences. So I feel like a rock star on that stage. And then like last night, for example, it was definitely like a lot of straight people in the audience, like boring. No, sorry, straight people. I do not mean you, if you're listening. The other ones. Yeah, different audiences respond differently. Like if it's mostly straight people, and especially in that room, I don't know, it was just a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
But you just have to remind yourself on stage, and this has taken me a while to do, but you remind yourself on stage that like, the more animated that you are, the more that they feel comfortable responding. So like at the start of my set, I had like my elbows in and I was like talking with my hands a little bit when normally I'm like quite flouncy.
Yeah.
Like at the LGBT stage. And so like I had to remind myself during my set to just like breathe more and like be more animated, and then because of that, and I'm moving around more and more, looking more comfortable on stage, the audience is more comfortable to laugh along.
Yeah.
So like I'm still learning and learning tricks that can turn like a tougher room into a little bit more relaxed and better, but it's still hard. It's still fucking, I mean, still,
It's difficult.
It's scary.
That's it. I feel like comedy is such an intimidating craft to me because I feel like all of the things I gravitate towards, if I fail, it's just kind of little old me in my room. But then I also find myself being a little jealous of more like performance-based things because you can interact with people more. I don't know. Respect, I guess, for comedy in general.
Thank you.
Were you interested in comedy as a child? Like, was that something, like you watched the stand-up sets or stuff like that, or it was more so as you were an adult?
Not really. It was definitely more as I became an adult. I remember in high school, someone told me, like one of my friends said that I should try stand-up comedy at some point because I was like really funny. And that was like the first time that I ever considered myself being funny, you know? It was weird. Like I knew that I was, but no one's ever said it out loud like that. So that's when it sort of like dropped a seed in my mind. And then I think in college I got more and more into watching stand-up, and that's sort of where I was like, oh, I think I could do this.
Yeah, the seed.
Yeah. And then right after college pretty much right after college, that's when we met in France. And then right after that, I moved to New Zealand. And then there just wasn't the opportunity. They had the weekly show.
Right.
And seeing that, I was like, oh, I could do it. But it seemed a little bit more selective because it was once a week. They have 6 comedians, and then there's already like people who live there who are already in the scene. So it just felt like, a little less accessible. And then, yeah, out here it seemed a lot more accessible, and it is. And that's the beauty of this scene in Barcelona in particular, because everyone's from everywhere. Lots of tourists, lots of immigrants, lots of expats, lots of locals who also are speaking in English and doing the comedy. It's just been very welcoming. So, yeah, I'm very lucky that I started here, I think.
I think you are too, just from what I've seen. But you told me that you went to Lisbon and there's some other comedy events.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I think, didn't you say that there were, people have said that you're lucky in Barcelona?
Yeah. So, I went to Lisbon last month for a stand-up comedy festival. They had 90 comedians from all around Europe, of all different levels as well. Like very beginners to not like really seasoned professionals. It was definitely more like, come try it, network and stuff. But yeah, people from scenes in like Amsterdam or Prague were saying like how lucky we are in Barcelona because it is so welcoming and there's so many opportunities for it. Because like in a lot of other cities, they just don't have as many shows, not as many opportunities, so it's a little more difficult to break into the scene.
Yeah.
Versus here, like right away, they were like, oh yeah, we have shows every night. You could go do comedy every night if you want to. The opportunity's there. You just do it as often as you'd like, really.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Like I guess there's not as much gatekeeping.
No. And then I went back to Denver last year to visit family, and I tried signing up for shows, and like half the people didn't respond to me. Half of them, and more of them were like, yeah, we could give you 2 minutes if you join our wait list of 8 weeks and send in a 10-minute video of yourself doing it, and then we'll decide if you could have a spot. And it's like, what the hell? So like, it's, how am I supposed to like even do a show? And for 2 minutes, like, and jumping through all these hoops, like, you're joking. No, I'm just gonna enjoy my time back home.
Yeah, sure. That's it. It's interesting to me because I feel like I've read about different cities throughout history where they had a specific open, I don't know, people could experiment and try things and like just like start painting or whatever. Like I think I'm thinking about like Paris in the 1920s or something like that, where a lot of people could go and just kind of be free, or like it was affordable, or for whatever reason, like arts could start. And I think sometimes I see people who want to get into something and they move to a city that has historically been a place where that's happened, but then they found it really hard because like it's competitive or there's a lot of gatekeeping. Like I could imagine starting comedy in like Denver or LA or New York would be
Austin's a big one too now.
Okay. Yeah. Do you know anything about like the history of comedy out in Europe? Like it's okay if you don't, but I'm just kind of curious about the scene here.
I don't know much about the history of comedy out here, but I think it's in its formative years of becoming what it is. Because like London has a very established, prominent scene, and it is quite, from what I've heard, I haven't tried performing there yet, but it is quite gate-kept, and it's hard to get spots and like break through. I don't know, I think it's something unique that we have in Barcelona right now at this point in time, because there's so many more comedians joining the scene and sticking around and more shows popping up, and it's becoming quite popular, but you just don't see that. Like English comedy in Europe, it's not as well established as it's becoming here. It's, I don't know. I don't know much of the history, but I know like some comedians who are like in the city here who sort of like founded the English comedy in Barcelona scene. There were like 10 of them at the start, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. And like they said like the scene is definitely not what it is now. Like you can maybe find a couple open mics a week scattered around town. And now there are like 3 strong venues that have English comedy and comedy in other languages too throughout the week, but it's every night of the week, and they said it's just blossoming and blooming and blowing up.
Ride that wave. That's really cool.
So don't know much about how it all started, but
I feel like that's a bit recent. Of an origin story. It feels recent. I feel like I think you were saying Michelle Wolf I think was someone who moved here, and that was post-pandemic.
Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah. I think she moved here in like 2021 or 2022. I'm not entirely sure when exactly, but she's been my favorite comedian for like 10 years. Like I watched her on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah in college, and I was like, that's who I like. That's my style of comedy that I like to listen to. And I'd always watch her Netflix specials. I actually would watch her to gain inspiration when I first started writing comedy, and then I found out after I started here that she lives here, and I was like, what? Which is just insane. So I think especially like having her here helps because she is international comedy star.
Mm-hmm.
Having a big name here that people know, and then they see, and then they're like, oh, there's a whole like scene here. I don't know.
Yeah, it works.
I think it works. It works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is gonna be, I think, a longer question, but
Yeah.
hopefully it lands. But
Yeah.
so for me, as I got into design like later on, like I had already studied and I had already lived in a couple different places, and I found that like doing this craft has kind of like shifted my personality a bit. Like it's like given me more confidence, or maybe like I feel like I cared about aesthetics before, but I didn't really like let myself like fully, I don't know, enjoy them in the way that I do now, where I'm like, oh, this thing really matters to me. And so I think I'm curious, this is the long question, I'm curious if since starting comedy you've seen any like, are you like more confident in yourself, or have you seen it like shift your personality or the things that you gravitate towards or anything?
Yeah. I think I've definitely become more confident, I think, since starting the comedy. I always find myself reverting to like the less confident in some situations, and I remind myself like, oh, I go on stage in front of strangers and tell very intimate stories about myself. Like I can talk to this person, it's fine. But yeah, so definitely gave me more confidence. I think if nothing else, I'm not sure if it has made me gravitate towards specific things more or less. Maybe I just don't understand the question as well.
The long question.
But it has provided like a sense of community, and it's like when I first got to Barcelona, maybe this is steering away from your question, but I'm gonna say it anyway.
Just like take it.
Like when I first got to Barcelona, I came out here to teach English, and I never ended up doing that because kids. And also residency issues, but like the people who I met in this teacher course I was taking, they all got student visas and they were here for like a year, maybe 2 years. So they were the first people who I met out here and I became close with, and they all left. So like, and then I started doing comedy probably like 6 months after I moved here, and then it was really nice because this community is from all over the world. So we all have like a shared experience, but these people are here to stay.
Yeah.
For the most part, so that's been really nice. I don't know. I still do generally the same things that I like doing when I was growing up. Comedy is just like another hobby that's added to it.
Sure.
I don't know. It's nice. And like if I'm bored at home, sometimes I just know like, okay, well, I know this person's performing. I'll go support them. And,
yeah.
Like, yeah, it gives you more stuff to do and people to hang out with and. Places to be, opportunities for creativity. Oh, I guess one thing, like I've been doing a writing group once a week with some of the other comedians on the scene, and it's been quite helpful. That's something to add to like my weekly agenda that I really enjoy.
Take me through a little bit of how jokes are written, because I'm super unfamiliar with that process.
Right. So.
Or like how you do it. I know people might do it a little differently.
Yeah. So what I usually do when I write a set is I have like a funny story. I have a plethora of them. And then I'm like, okay, so this was really funny what happened to me. And I write essentially the bones of the story, and then I see where there are places where like, okay, this is too much description. Where can I break it up and then throw in a punchline? That's like usually a misdirect. Also the way that I say things on stage, because like I'm quite camp, I think, when I do my comedy. I definitely pull out, like, it's still my personality, but it's an exaggerated form of it, I'd say.
Yeah. Does that help you like differentiate?
Yeah. So like what I like write it, and then I like say it in front of the mirror, and I'm like very animated when I do it. I turn up the gay a little bit, and I think it just like makes it a little funnier. So yeah, essentially start with a story, find where to put the punchlines, and I don't know, I've always been one to like edit as I go. So like it could take me forever to write like a 5-minute set, but I know like once I finish that, it's pretty much good. Like there will be like the more you perform it, you're gonna be like, okay, that one didn't work as well, so how can I change it? And like try new things, of course. But yeah.
Is being in a group of people like doing the same kind of like writing process helpful for that? Like have you like gotten tips from other people or like taught other people things?
Yeah, so it is really nice doing the writing group because you bounce ideas off of each other. Everyone sort of has a different perspective and approach.
We had some technical difficulties with
Yeah.
storage spaces on my iPhone 11.
I know, technical.
So we should probably wrap it up for the sake of my phone storage. But I think the last thing we were talking about was were your tips for getting into comedy.
Oh my God, yeah.
So, yeah, if you want to finish that, or we can ask a different
Right,
question.
okay, yeah. Make it personal, make it like, for me this works at least. Write a story, find where to get the punchlines. Give yourself, like sign up for the show and give yourself a deadline before you start writing. That always helped me. And then just run over it a few times in front of the mirror. And then I always write like notes on my hand to make sure I don't get completely lost. And then it's gonna be scary no matter what. You're gonna be nervous, so you just gotta get up on stage and do it.
Is it scary every time for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It still is. Not as scary as the first time, and there are certainly some shows that are scarier than others, but still, yeah, get like way too nervous. It's so embarrassing and dumb. It's been almost 2 years. Like I have a lot of shows under my belt, and I'm still like nervous. Yeah.
Do you have a routine to like help with nerves or anything? Because I feel like if I tried to do it, I would be visibly shaking.
Yeah.
Like you're in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah. So before the show, I always practice my set at least one more time in front of the wall or the mirror. I am a very bad conversationalist before a show. Like it's better to talk to me after I've gone up and done my set because it's just on my mind. It's running through my mind. Yeah, I don't know. Like not condoning like belligerent drinking or anything, but I always find like when I'm in a new venue or doing a show where I'm like quite a little bit more nervous than usual, I find 1 or maximum 2 drinks just like it does build a little bit more confidence, so it doesn't seem as scary. But then like once you're used to a venue or a show, then I recommend just like doing it sober because you don't want to make a habit out of relying on that.
Yeah.
But new venues, new like scarier shows, it does make a difference and it does help for me at least. Yeah.
Okay. And I think you have a comedy Instagram and stuff like that. So I can link that in the description if you'd like.
Yeah, I don't update it too much. I just post like when I'm having shows at this point. Because I'm out of phone storage too. I don't record my sets anymore. Oh wait, that's another tip. Record your set so that you can look back and see how you did, especially when you're starting out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good tips. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jagiello. Well,
no problem,
your camp name. All right.
Yeah, it was a blessing.